Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a small bottle of pills that would have looked like literal magic to almost every human who has ever lived. Take a headache. You swallow a tablet, drink some water, and move on with your morning. 90 seconds. Problem solved. Now rewind 60,000 years. Same headache. Same throbbing behind the eyes. Except this time, there is no bottle, no pharmacy, no doctor down the street. Just a fire, a cave, and a group of people who have absolutely no idea what a bacterium is, what a virus is, or what's actually happening inside your skull. And yet somehow they survived. Not just that headache. Everything. Broken legs, infected wounds, difficult births. For more than 99% of the time humans have existed on this planet, there was no medicine as we'd recognize it today. No hospitals, no antibiotics, no germ theory. So how did we make it to Tuesday? The answer is stranger than you'd expect, and part of it starts, unexpectedly, in the mouth of a chimpanzee. Deep in the forests of Africa, researchers have watched chimps do something odd. When sick, some of them seek out specific plants they normally avoid, bitter, rough-textured leaves with no nutritional value and a genuinely awful taste. They eat them anyway. It turns out these plants physically scrape parasites from the gut or contain compounds that are mildly toxic to those exact parasites. The chimps aren't guessing. They're self-medicating. If our closest living relatives can do that, it's reasonable to think our ancestors could too. And they had something chimpanzees don't: language and the ability to pass a discovery down through generations. That's the real starting point of medicine. Not one genius moment, but a habit of remembering. One person eats a plant and the pain fades. They tell someone. That person tells someone else. Multiply that by 10,000 generations, and you get a body of knowledge nobody invented alone, but everybody carried. Then came a discovery that rewrote the entire timeline. In a limestone cave on the island of Borneo, archaeologists uncovered a skeleton roughly 31,000 years old, missing part of one leg. Not lost in an accident. Removed cleanly. The bone around the stump had healed and reshaped itself, which means one thing: the amputation happened, and the patient lived. For years, maybe decades afterward. Before this find, most historians assumed complex surgery was a fairly recent invention, something from the last few thousand years, once civilizations had writing and dedicated healers. This skeleton pushed that timeline straight into the Ice Age. Stone tools. No anesthesia beyond whatever plants were on hand. No concept of infection, and still survival. It isn't an isolated case either. Skulls found on nearly every continent show neat, deliberately drilled holes, a procedure called trepanation. It sounds brutal, and it was. But the bone around many of those holes shows signs of healing. The patients lived. Nobody knows exactly why prehistoric healers first cut into a living skull, or how they figured out it could work without killing the patient instantly. What we do know is that it happened again and again, across cultures that had no contact with each other, which suggests, in its own unsettling way, that it worked often enough to be worth repeating. So here's the real question. How do you learn medicine with no science, no textbooks, and no idea what a cell even is? The honest answer is failure. Thousands of years of trial, of watching what killed people and what didn't, of a healer noticing that a wound packed with honey stayed clean while another one didn't. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, some copied from sources centuries older, list hundreds of remedies using plants, minerals, and animal products. Many were useless. Some were dangerous, but some were remarkably effective, and today we know exactly why. Honey really is antibacterial. Its low moisture and natural acidity make it a poor place for bacteria to grow. Garlic really does fight infection. Willow bark really does ease pain and fever because it contains a compound chemically related to aspirin. They didn't understand the mechanism. They just knew it worked, and that was enough to write it down and pass it forward. Even Neanderthals, not fully modern humans, appear to have practiced a version of this. Dental plaque recovered from Neanderthal remains in Europe, contains traces of plants still used medicinally today. Plants with no nutritional value, but documented pain-relieving and antimicrobial properties. Whatever we want to call what Neanderthals were doing, random isn't the right word for it. The theory was wrong. The result sometimes was right. And when nothing else worked, ancient people still had one thing left: each other. Isolation slows healing. That's measurable science today. But ancient communities seem to understand it instinctively. The sick were kept warm, fed, and never left alone. Groups that built caregiving into their social structure simply outlasted the ones that didn't. Evolution wasn't only shaping bodies, it was shaping kindness. None of this means ancient medicine was gentle. It wasn't. In many pre-modern societies, something like 1 in every 30 to 100 births ended in the mother's death. In many places, half of all children didn't reach their 5th birthday. A minor cut could turn fatal within a week. Living to 50 was in a lot of times and places a genuine achievement, and yet people kept surviving, kept healing each other, kept passing down what worked. Here's the part that should change how you look at your own medicine cabinet. A huge share of modern pharmaceuticals trace directly back to this ancient trial and error. Aspirin, from willow bark. Morphine, from the opium poppy. Quinine, the drug that broke malaria's grip across entire continents, came from tree bark used for centuries by indigenous healers in South America, long before anyone in Europe had ever heard of it. One of today's most important malaria treatments comes from sweet wormwood, used in Chinese medicine for 2,000 years, before scientists ever isolated its active compound. A heart medication still prescribed today traces back to foxglove, used by folk healers in Britain long before it had a formal name. The World Health Organization estimates that around 80% of people on Earth today still rely primarily on plant-based medicine, not out of superstition, but because it works, and because that ancient chain of observation never actually broke. So the next time you take a pill for a headache, remember what you're really holding: the end product of tens of thousands of years spent by people who had no idea what a virus was, but refused to stop trying anyway. They didn't inherit medicine, they built it. One desperate experiment at a time, so that you wouldn't have to.